lowered the resolution. YouTube says I'm online. Twitch, however, does not say that I'm online. Sorry for the background noise, guys. I could probably use some sound absorbing foam in the future, but I don't have that on me right now. Let me go ahead and check Twitch to make sure that's online. Does Twitch even support the resolution that I'm doing? I switched over to 3K because of the fact that I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it looks like I'm offline according to Twitch. Unfortunately. Does Twitch support 3K? Let me do a quick check. Does Twitch support 3K? Yep, doesn't look like they support it. Ah, Twitch is online now. Hold up. Looks like we're online. Come on. Am I online? It took a little bit longer, but it looks like we're online. That is perfect. Just took a little bit, but it looks like we're online. Guys, what is up on the U-Box? This is Top Hat Productions 115 coming at you with yet another video. We have a few things to talk about. I'm going to try to keep this short, maybe under 30 minutes, but I can't promise anything. So let's just jump right into it. Firstly, as usual, we're going to talk about Project Personal Data Center. And we have some server updates. I'm going to skip over this last part because we have something a little bit more important. We're going to talk about these two posts right here. And I'm going to start with just a short summary. Back in September 27th of 2020, this year, right? So late September of this year, like last month, I and a few other people worked to address an issue with the server project having to do with the 16 terabyte storage array. You've heard about this multiple times, but it is a two-part story, and both parts were aggravating, to say the least. The first part was the fact that I was using the wrong power cable to try and power the thing. It was that COM-EP cable that I mentioned earlier, like over a month ago. And the thing is, that cable wasn't designed to work with the DL580G7, and long story short, it wasn't powering the drive cage at all. No power is being sent to the cage as a result, and I had to switch that out for a proper SATA extender. Instead of having the COM-EP cable plugged in directly into the PSU, which seemed to have been the obvious solution at the time, but ended up not being a solution at all, instead, I switched over to using a SATA power extender, which connected directly to the DL580's motherboard. As I've mentioned in another previous video, the DL580G7 actually has a built-in SATA power connector on the motherboard, which provides enough power, surprisingly, to power all four of those 3.5-inch SAS drives. So I ended up using that with the SATA extender, and that made sure that the drive cage was actually powered properly. And one of the easiest ways I could tell that the drive cage was powered up was the fact that not only did the fan spin, but also the drive light indicators actually turned on as well. The drives being online being indicated by blue and purplish magenta telling when the drives were actually being accessed. Before, when I had just the COM-EP cable, the only thing that spun up was the drive cage fan itself, but the drive indicator lights didn't turn on. So that was the first part, getting the drive cage powered properly. The second part, however, was actually getting data to actually, well, not getting data. The second part was actually getting the drives seen in an operating system. And that one was a little bit trickier because of the fact that while power had already been taken care of, getting the drives to be detected in an OS ended up not being nearly as simple as I initially thought. Part of the reason was because of the fact that the firmware, as in the original firmware that came with the HBA, but yeah, the firmware on the HBA was a little bit too old, and for whatever reason did not work with any operating system whatsoever. Didn't work with Windows 10, didn't work with ESXi, didn't even work in Linux really. And no matter what I plugged the HBA into originally, when it had 17.x firmware, it just, the HBA showed up, but the drives connected to it didn't, even though they were powered up. So after a while, I started looking into things. The first thing that I was asked was whether or not the drives were really being powered properly. We looked into that, and in the end, that ended up not being the case. Second issue that, or at least the second potential issue was the data cable that I was using. The data cable that I was using, or should I say am still using, is a breakout. I think it's a forward breakout cable. I have to remember what it's called now. Is it SFP something? You know, I'm not going to remember, but I have it on the parts list here, so I can pull it up right now. Let's see here. Yes, Mini SAS SFF 8088 to SATA forward breakout 4X cable. And that was the next link in the chain that had to be tested. Only issue is I didn't have a spare of that cable to test with. So instead, what I ended up doing was I actually tried connecting the drives. I tried directly connecting the drives to another computer. In this case, I had to use a T7500 because the T7500 has a built-in SAS controller, unlike all of my other computers. And the drives I bought were SAS. So no matter how much testing I did, the drives, well, actually, should I say, no matter how much testing and finagling that I did, I couldn't get the drives to be detected by the laptop because the laptop doesn't have a built-in SAS controller. Duh. The T7500 does, so the T7500 was the only real testing candidate in this case to see if the drives even worked. And they sort of worked on the T7500, which meant that the drives probably should be fine. Not only that, but also it kind of helped to eliminate the drive cage being the issue, because if the drive cage had been the issue, I'm thinking that the drives wouldn't have shown up at all. But that could just be wrong thinking on my part. In the end, the drive cage ended up not being the issue. Moving on to more testing, I was actually able to test the drives in the cage, which of course helped to get rid of a few factors. However, there was another roadblock after that, if I remember correctly. The initial testing that I did was in a Linux live CD for an older version of Manjaro Linux. And after flashing, I think... Yeah, let me take a few steps back. And also check the time here. Just make sure I'm not going over my time. Yeah, I'm 7 minutes in, so I'm going to try to close things out really quickly. The drives did not show up when they were connected to the SAS controller originally, so I ended up removing the SAS controller from the equation at some point and just testing the drives in the drive cage directly in the T7500. And lo and behold, the drives were detected in the old Manjaro live CD without the HBA, which kind of pointed to the HBA possibly being the weak link in the entire chain, because the drives did at least show up in Manjaro half the time, and I was even able to actually format them GPT and everything, and for the most part the drives actually did show up. They took a while to show up though, because they actually had to spin up first and everything, but they showed up. So that kind of led me to assume that it could be the HBA itself. And one of the first things I thought about was whether or not the firmware on it was old. But my friend and I ended up testing a few other prevailing theories to see if anything else could have been the issue. And what I ended up doing in the end was flashing the new version, the new firmware. It was firmware version 20 point something, I believe, and it was called the IT firmware. So I ended up flashing a newer version of the IT firmware, and then after that, testing it in the server itself. Lo and behold, not only did the HBA work, but the drives ended up showing up as well. But before I even got to that part, I actually tried testing out a new version of the Manjaro Live CD, and that ended up throwing a wrench in plans a little bit, at least before testing it in ESXi, because Manjaro didn't show the new version of the Manjaro Live CD didn't show the hard drives at all, which kind of confused things a little bit on my end. But when that happened, that just kind of pushed me to test ESXi anyway, just to make sure that it wasn't the new Live CD not being compatible for whatever reason. And lo and behold, the new firmware actually helped to fix the issue. It gets detected in ESXi, and I can even actually select the drives and everything, perform various operations, etc. But long story short, we got the drives working. Jumping over to, and do I have a link to it? I don't know if I do. Let me check my clipboard here. Do I have it? I might not have it. here's what I'll do. I'll just pull up my history here. Yes, there we go, there we go. Here's the accepted solution. After eliminating the power issue and after eliminating the firmware issue, since I was finally able to see the 4 terabyte drives, I was able to do as L'Allegre, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, I was able to do as they suggested and use RDM in order to actually have the drives presented to the VMs. This is the correct solution. I was able to directly hook up the drives to a VM with, is it RDM mapping? Yes, raw device mapping. And as he says here, I pretty much used raw device mapping to present storage LUNs directly to the VMs. In this case, they suggested, I think it was using 1 storage LUN for the entire drive. Yeah, configure 1 LUN per the space of the full disk. So I pretty much used raw device mapping to present a storage LUN to the VM, and in this case I used 1 storage LUN for the entirety of the storage on 1 drive. And that is how I got it working. So thanks to this dude, I was able to actually implement the finalized solution. But before implementing this solution, I had a friend of mine on Discord and I had to jump through a whole bunch of research and crap trying to get the 16 terabytes of drives to even show up in ESXi. So it was like a 3-part thing. 1, powering the drive cage and the drives in it. 2, making sure that the HBA wasn't in the way and actually updating the firmware. And then 3, finally implementing this solution here, which is practically the best solution, especially in my case. So after, I think it's the 25th now, and the initial solution, I think, for the first problem was discovered back in September 27th. So it's been over a month since I've been trying to figure this out, and it took multiple people helping me out to get this far. But I'm happy to say that we've gotten this far, and it's thanks to people like L'Allegre and people on Discord all working with me to help figure out this issue. So I'd like to thank the community for helping out, and as a result, Project Personal Data Center, the new server project, is still underway. It is still going. It is thanks to the community. Moving on to the next part now, I am happy to also go into the fact that I might be getting a new server rack for the 580 in just a bit. As you can see here, I'm planning on getting a server rack, a few server drawers, maybe a few server shelves, and a PDU or 2. In addition to this, I was possibly thinking of also maybe trying to soundproof the enclosure, but I still haven't really figured out how to do that yet. I'm still working on that part. For now, the most important thing is getting the server rack here in the first place, so that I have a better place to put the server, along with any accompanying equipment that may come up in the near future. That's just pretty much to help clean up the setup that I currently have here, because I currently have the server sitting on top of a piece of furniture, as some of you guys on Discord may or may not already know. And as noted on the side of the chassis here, the thing can be anywhere from like 80 pounds to 110 pounds fully loaded, and moving this massive block of steel around can sometimes scratch up the surface, the wooden surface of the piece of furniture that I have it sitting on, and I really don't want to leave this thing scratched up. So if you've seen the photos of how the server is sitting currently, you'll know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I'll just go on and spill the beans here. It's sitting on top of a wooden, I think it's called a bureau, a wooden bureau with 3 drawers in it, and some of the drawers are being used for storing things pertaining to the server. However, I kind of want to move away from that because of the fact that I also have a spare parts bin sitting to my left here, in addition to the wooden bureau sitting on my right, and that just means I have like spare parts kind of scattered in at least 2 or 3 places across my room. And what I really like to do is kind of take all of those parts and just consolidate them into some server rack drawers that are sitting directly underneath of the working components, so that everything will be in one place. And if I need to make a hot swap really fast, all I have to do is at most turn off the server maybe, or maybe turn off a VM, pull out the part, as in the bad part, that's having the issue or may be even dead, and then replace it with something that's in the server drawer directly beneath it. But in order to have a clean enough setup to do that, I have to have something like the server rack in order to implement that. So the server rack is going to be the next move. And hopefully I'll be able to not only move the server and the spare parts, but also the networking equipment and other things onto this rack to kind of clean up the setup. As such, I have allocated budget to it for the next month or so, and hopefully I'll be able to get this done for under $200, maybe $300 at most. The server rack itself I can probably do for $200 at most, and it'll be around 27 or 28U. The rack drawers and the rack shelves, however, are not finalized, and that's still up in the air. Still working on that. On to the next part, and how much time do I have left? Yeah, 16 minutes. Okay, so I have 4 minutes left. I don't really have too much else to talk about, but let me make sure that I haven't skipped over anything. I talked about the server. Yes, there is one more thing to talk about. Aside from this, there is one more thing to talk about. I am currently streaming in 3K resolution right now instead of 4K. The reason why that is actually kind of twofold. Firstly, there are restrictions on streaming 4K on both Twitch and YouTube. And on Twitch, I believe I have to have like partner status or something like that to even stream in 4K. I managed to make a 4K snippet on Twitch, but I don't think I'll be able to repeat that. I am technically not allowed to stream 4K on Twitch. So I've lowered the resolution to make sure that I'm within the guidelines, seeing that I do not have that privilege on the platform at this time. For YouTube, they don't have as many restrictions. The only thing with YouTube is, in order to actually stream 4K, I have to have some serious bandwidth, like massive bandwidth. I think they require like 10 megabits per second. Yeah, 10 megabits per second in order to actually stream 4K, that which I definitely do not have. So I've lowered the resolution instead, which makes it easier on me, and also makes it so that I can actually stream higher resolution content to you guys without actually, you know, dropping back to something like 1440p or 1080p. But the reason why I chose 3K as a resolution is because of the fact that it keeps the same aspect ratio that you guys have been using and seeing on pretty much every live stream that I've done. I've been doing 1080p for the longest time, but before that I did 720p. The move to 1080p was so that you guys could actually get full HD content. But ever since moving to 1080p, if I remember correctly, the aspect ratio may have actually like changed a little bit. But I wanted to preserve the aspect ratio of 1080p. And in order to do so, I actually had to look into all the available resolutions, and I saw that 1440p didn't keep the same aspect ratio as 1080p. So I decided to instead move to 3K. 3K reserves that aspect ratio while providing a higher resolution than 1440p, and also giving you guys at least something closer to 4K than what 1440p would have been. It is not the full 4K experience by any means. I still have a long way to go, but it is a much higher resolution than 1080p, and this stream is the first time that I'm even using 3K. So we're really just going to have to see how it turns out. Hopefully it'll show up as something higher than 1440p, but if it ends up being 1440p, I can't really do anything about that. So long story short, we are at a higher resolution, but it is not 4K. We still have a long way to go before 4K, and I'm currently looking into capture card hardware and stuff like that to see if I can actually improve the experience and maybe move to 4K in the future, in addition to other networking upgrades I may have to make in the next 2 years. But long story short, 4K is still in the works. We need a network upgrade because I'm definitely not pulling off 10 megabits per second anytime soon, and I also possibly need to look into a capture card because I don't even know if NVENC, in my case, is going to be enough. I don't have an RTX card, I don't have Turing NVENC or Ampere NVENC, and therefore probably won't be able to do that with the current GPU that I have. With that said, we are still at a higher resolution, and it's at the same aspect ratio as 1080p content that I used to do before, which means that there shouldn't be any weird changes like black bars along the top or the sides of the video, and it should still be a relatively seamless experience for you guys. And it should hold over at least until I can reach 4K. With that, I'm going to go on and move on to the final point of the video, and that is the new mod pack. We have a new mod pack that is currently in the works. It is called Mystic Portals, and where's the list of mods? I will give you guys the list of included mods in an upcoming. You know what? I don't have to wait on that. Let's do it right now. Twitch. I'll go on and pull up the list of mods. Of course, as usual, you have to add Optifine, but aside from Optifine, everything else is already here. So let's see if I can pull this up. Games. Come on. There we go. Here is the current list of mods. We have Better Portals, we have Journey Map, we have Mistcraft, we have Shadowfax Forgelin. My apologies if I didn't get the name right. We have the Midnight, and we have Waystones. And I'm currently in the process of configuring each and every mod for a cohesive new experience. This is going to be the third mod pack that I've begun working on. We have FIIK and Dynamic Nature, and now we also have this mod pack as well. I originally intended to actually make this mod pack just an extension of FIIK and Dynamic Nature, but after that came to the conclusion, with the help of some friends on Discord, yet again the community, that it might be better off as just a separate experience. And in the coming months we may add the Aether mod to all three mod packs. So expect some updates, expect changes, expect a change in the adventure. Yeah, I don't need that open anymore. But long story short, you guys now have a new mod pack. And now for the real final point here, right? The real final point. This little icon right here is not new. It has been around for a while. My friends, we are considering a change in branding. This is your hint. This is what's up and coming. In the next few months or so, I'm going to be working on trying to actually get this ready so that it can be deployed to all content streams. So just be ready for that. The old hat will still be around, but it might be retired in the next year or so. So just be on the lookout. This is incoming. It is confirmed. I've been sitting on it for years, and I didn't really want to push that out just yet, but it's happening. So with that, you have one more thing to look forward to. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. If you like the content that you see here, leave a like and maybe even consider subscribing. And for any of you who are not new here, who've already been around for a while, thank you for supporting the channel as always. And maybe even drop a few suggestions about what we should do in the next video. I could try doing a gaming video in the next week or so. That'll definitely test the infrastructure that I currently have here to see whether or not I can even do 3K streaming for gaming. And aside from that, thank you for seeing this update. It has been 24 minutes, so I'm practically 4 minutes over my limit. And to any new viewers, yet again, welcome to the galaxy. This is Top Hat.